Namaskar, hello and welcome to NCERT's live phone-in program. In this history class for all the 12th class students, we are here with a theme, and the theme is locating India's struggle for independence. Textual materials of some neighboring countries. We have just witnessed the 75th Independence Day of our country, and I think this theme is the most appropriate to discuss in this history class. We have an expert with us who will be talking about this topic. Various aspects of independence will be talked about. If you have any questions, any queries regarding it, please feel free to reach us to send your questions. You can mail us your questions on our email ID, which is dth.class12@ciet.nic.in. You're watching us live on PMeVIDYA channel number 12 and also on our YouTube channel, which is NCERT Official. In the live chat box, you can write down your questions, queries, anything at all related to this topic and send it to us. This is a 1-hour session and we'll be talking about it in depth. So be ready and we'll be taking your questions whenever you will send in. We have an expert, like I said, so let's meet her. She is Professor Gauri Srivastav. Welcome, ma'am.
Welcome and namaskar to all of you. A warm welcome. And I thought that in the 75th year of our independence, let's see how we are reflected in the neighboring countries.
Absolutely.
And that felt me so wanted. I said, let me share this with you because you have already done it in class 8, you have done it in class 10, and now you're doing it in Themes in Indian History part 3. Therefore, I thought it's opportune for you to find how our struggle for independence is reflected in some of our neighboring countries. Yes.
Exactly. So let me just introduce you, ma'am, to our viewers here. She is the head of the Department of Education in Social Sciences, NCERT, New Delhi. And this is a very interesting topic. She has even given you and me a little brief about this topic. So let's ask her the first question, which is, ma'am, why exactly did you pick this topic only and why not something else?
That's a wonderful question that you have asked, and I think my viewers here will be wanting to know why did I do it. I did it because I felt I was a student, I was a researcher, and now I'm a professional, that when we study our struggle for independence and when we see it reflected in some textbooks of neighboring countries, it feels very nice. And I felt very nice when I said, yes, it is there. And it is this feeling that made me come to you and tell you about what I read, and definitely I did not see, but I read these books and I thought, let me see in what way the freedom struggle of India is represented in the content portrayal, visual depiction and the exercises. This will make you more interested because I'm sure you make projects and many of you get interested in knowing how these movements of ours are reflected in different countries' textbook. It will take you to a journey of exploration. It will make you a researcher. It will also make you build upon it. And each theme is so engaging that you can take it as a topic of research. And I decided that let me share with you what I have read in a nutshell, because this is a session for 1 hour, and let me see how much I can share with you of what I read. It's a simplistic analysis and just a projection of how our struggle for independence is reflected. So you can see the introductory slide which I would like to share with you. The first thing is India's struggle for independence, as you have seen in this PowerPoint presentation, has been reflected in social studies as well as social science textbooks of some neighboring countries. A few years down the journey, I did have a fortune of collecting some textbooks, and based on those materials I have made this presentation and I am sharing with you. Definitely I must say here the limitation is the time, because some of them are published quite early, but they are insightful, and they will definitely tell us about how this movement of ours is projected. The second is the focus to see, as I said, in which manner these themes have been reflected in content, visual as well as exercises. If you look at the themes that you are engaging with yourselves with, different themes have a title, they have the content, they have the visuals, they have certain activities, and then you have the end text exercises. These books also had, but they were of varying nature, which I will be sharing across. Then the identifying significant portrayal of movements that have been mentioned, which involved people from all segments of society. Therefore, my presentation would focus on the movements that were of that involved people from different sections of society. And when I looked into the visuals, I would tell you that most of the visuals and personality was situated with the events where they contributed, as well as there was a brief biography that have been mentioned. So, the detail will come subsequently when I make my presentation, but definitely there must be a curiosity in you, what books is she talking about? Now, the books that I have analyzed are Bangladesh Social Science for classes 9th and 10th, the revised edition is 2002, which I consulted. Then the Nepal textbook, which is called Social Studies textbook of grade 9, it is revisited, revised in 2004. Then the Maldives textbooks called Social Studies 2 for grade 7, and it is revised in 2007. Then the Sri Lankan textbooks, which are called History grade 9, and they have been published by the Education Publication Division Department, and this is the latest that I have, that is the 2020 edition. So, you can see that some of them are early 2000, and then they move on to 2020. So, these are in short the books that I have consulted. And then how are the themes positioned when they talked about India's struggle for independence? It is very interesting, and if you see the title is the Bangladesh books, which mention in their scheme of different selection of themes, that is for the freedom struggle it is movement for political self-determination. Then the title that Nepal has for our freedom struggle is India's War of Independence. The Maldivian textbooks mentions nationalism in Asia and the 20th century Maldives, and the sub-theme is Indian national movement and the independence of South Asia. The Sri Lankan textbook has also mentioned independence movement of India. So, you can see for yourself that the title of the themes which portray the struggle for India's freedom is varied and interesting. They are, some of the themes are generalized, which I have said earlier forms part of the entire colonial struggle in Asia. Some of them are very specific to the Indian context. So, these are the themes that I culled out, looked into them, and found out how our struggle for independence has been reflected. Moving on, I have limited myself because I did not want to say everything that was given in the book, but I culled out and I focused mainly on those which talked about the movement. The struggle for Indian independence spanned a huge time, took a huge time span. It was a broad canvas, and within that canvas I selected these movements, and definitely I felt happy that yes, they are reflected. However, the manner in which they have been reflected are brief and generalized, definitely, because they have to put these themes in the larger portrayal of the other themes of social sciences, and therefore these do find a place, and as I move forward I will be discussing that. Now,
So, ma'am, with the books you have searched and researched, it seems like you have worked very hard into the whole theme, and it shows here that you have done it.
yes, you see, when you get interested, you want to see how things get reflected. Then there is there's a way in which you see, and of course there was an approach with which I analyzed, and I will share with you how did I do it. The first and foremost was that I wanted to see what are the phases that have been reflected, as I just said a bit earlier. Then the second thing was, if personalities are mentioned, how are they mentioned? Is it biographical or is it situated with the event? Then the third thing that engaged me was the exercises, and very interestingly you will know that some of the books, for example the Maldivian textbooks, they talk about activity as well as some questions which the student would like to do. Then I move on to the textbooks of Nepal, where the exercises are not are positioned in a very interesting way. They have small answers for classroom activities, where I think the designer or the writer must have wanted the children to actively participate. Then there was some for the community, which again I found something very interesting, because here the oral aspect was important. The question that was placed was, you can go to your community members and find out, have any one of them or their grandparents participated in the struggle for independence, and after discussing with them, write a short note. So this was something which I found very interesting. And then in the textbook of Bangladesh, the exercises were very simple, which said short answer questions, long answer questions and objective type. You must be doing that. Similarly, we had this in our textbooks of Bangladesh, whereas the Sri Lankan textbooks also talk about activities as well as certain questions which are posed. In the Nepal textbook, which I wanted once again to share with you, some of the question was, recollect how what goes in your mind when you think about a revolt, asking the child to think even from the contemporary perspective, that when they read about revolt, what comes to their mind. And this is certain ways that I wanted to share some of the assessment style questions. Now the approaches was very simple, to find how are we represented. That was my focus, and therefore based on that I saw these different movements. Now going to visuals, I wanted to share something very interesting. Now as you see the second slide, as I have discussed, themes are designed as part of the larger narrative of attainment of freedom in not only India, but some of the books talk about the Asian context. The other thing is the focus of movements, the factual narration of all the movements that I have studied does follow a chronology. So chronology of events have been taken care of. Then a generalized picture, of course specificity has been mentioned. If you look into the analogy, the cause, the consequence and the impact has been kept up while discussing each and every movement. Then the linkage between the time, space and institution, which is an important part of social sciences, has been partially done. Sometimes the event is discussed and just in a very small way the space of its occurrence is mentioned, but what was the institutional mechanism are discussed, but not in great detail. So while the rubrics have been kept, the manner in which they have been narrated is very, very generalized. Definitely so, because the space they occupy in the larger scheme of social studies, social sciences, which most of the books have been titled as, and then in that you have description of geography, you have description of history, you have description of administration. So you can see why it occupies a generalized picture. Now the glimpses, if you want to see, is referring to the 1857 very interestingly, which I will be sharing with you. Then the partition of Bengal, the Swadeshi movement, the non-cooperation and the Khilafat agitation, the civil disobedience movement of 1930 and the Quit India movement. All of them have been variedly discussed in an interesting manner.
Ma'am, one question I wanted to ask here, because you've mentioned Maldives, Nepal. So, were there perspective also attached to these movements, to these incidents India and Indians faced? Was there any difference to actual facts or their perspective?
You see, as far as I said, the causes, the consequences and the effect have been discussed across, if you talk about movement. The second thing is that there were some movements which have been very partially stated, because while they talk of satyagraha and non-violence, in some it is very overtly stated. And the movement, for example, in Maldives textbooks, there is a very slight reference to the civil disobedience movement. Similarly, in Bangladesh textbook, there is absolutely not much reference, just touched upon it. So, and they give more focus on 1920, they give more focus on the Swadeshi movement. So there is a kind of variance, as I said. The movement of India's independence, I would like to say here, occupies more space in the Bangladesh textbook, followed by Sri Lanka, whereas in Maldives and the Nepal textbook, they are mentioned, but in limited spaces. So this is the variance that I found, but in the large landscape, the children gets a view of these important movements that formed an important part of our struggle for independence. And this is what I would like to share with you, and probably go further and take one movement and deliberate upon it.
Absolutely.
Now you can see another slide. This is a very important thing which I wanted to share with you, is while personalities are referred, the only visual that dominates all the textbook is Mahatma Gandhi. He is not only reflected, but his visuals are there. In addition to that, we have some visuals that talk about different movements, and this is one visual which I wanted to share. This visual is not part of the textbook. It is another book that I had just got with me, and this textbook is called the Cambridge History Program, India from Mughal Empire to the British Raj. It is in this textbook that I found this visual, and this Rani of Jhansi, you can see, dominates the narrative, and you have one visual which shows about the grease cartridge. Now when you talk of the 1857, this was one of the important causes that sparked the movement. And here this visual in this particular book gives you the details of how a sepoy had to use his mouth to break the cartridge, which was smeared with the animal fat of cow and pig, and this was what the sepoys resented. And therefore you can see this entire picture, the description is given in detail and the map. So here the Rani of Jhansi is a visual which was made by an unknown artist in 1890, and therefore I wanted to tell you that not only this, but in other books also I found that the visuals are drawn mainly by the artist. Now if you take personalities, we find that in the Sri Lankan textbook you have a box item given in the end, and these box items make a reference to Dadabhai Nauroji, Surendranath Banerjee, Bal Gangadhar Tilak with their visuals, Mahatma Gandhi, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad and Jawaharlal Nehru. As far as Bangladesh textbook goes, we find that the Bangladesh textbook in the context of 1857 make mention of Rani of Jhansi and Nana Sahib. Then moving further is the Nepal textbook, where I already said that Mahatma Gandhi's visual is very much given, and the names of the other leaders are mentioned. For example, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Motilal Nehru, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Mahatma Gandhi. And brief biography or Bal Gangadhar Tilak has been also mentioned in his date of birth and his major contribution, his slogans, that has been reflected. And I said the Maldivian textbook interestingly also have the visual of Mahatma Gandhi and common people. Perhaps they were not there, which I understand, but they were contemporary pictures of also showing that movements also had people's participation. So this is in a nutshell that I wanted to talk about the visuals. Now some reflection and observation. As I said, the chronology of movements has been correctly stated. The cause and consequences, as I said, have been very briefly stated. Portrayal of some leaders related to different movement, that has been reflected, but here again very briefly and not how they participated. It's just the leadership and their engagement has been reflected. Then the spread and the reach. The visual content of my of most of the books have been very limited, and the narration is very simplistic, and the exercises definitely want the child to get engaged immensely, but once again the very fact that they find a coverage in itself made me feel so wanted and happy that yes, we are there. That feeling I got. Now I take up one by one how these movements have been projected. Now assessment question, as I said, question and activities are sometimes given together. Classroom activity and community related activity are stated at the end of the theme, and this is true for the Nepal textbook. Then objective type, short answer and essay form an important part of assessment, especially of the Bangladesh textbook. Now taking 1857, it is very interesting. You have read it in class 8 and you are reading in class 12, themes in Indian history. As you read this theme, you will be very interested to know how these books make a mention of this important episode that happened in our struggle for independence. Now the Maldivian textbooks talk about it, term is that rebellion. They say it is a rebellion. Then the causes are highlighted, and the primacy is given to the cartridge, the smearing of the cartridge with the animal fat. Then the deep-seated political, economic and social discontent. This was in a nutshell, I found the reference to 1857 in the Maldivian textbook. Moving on to the Bangladesh textbook of classes 9th and 10th, again the term used is important landmark. You see, from a rebellion we move on to the terminology used is the important landmark. It is also used, I used it in an inverted comma, referred to as the first war of independence of India against the British rule. An interesting part of this reflection of the movement is the reference to earlier movement. The book mentions that it was not just 1857, but prior to that there were other small uprisings like the Fakir movement, Ditmur movement, the Farazi movement. This was referred in the book. Then people supported it. It was not just the sepoys, but the common people also joined. The ultimate aim, as the chapter says, was to put an end to the company's rule in India. Then what were the political causes? As I said, they do follow the trajectory of cause, consequences and impact. The causes were political because there is a reference to Dalhousie's policy of doctrine of lapse. Then it infuriated many of the ruling princes at that time. They were, and states that got annexed were Satara, Nagpur, Jhansi, Sambalpur, etc. Then the Nawab Wajid Ali Shah of Awadh, he was ousted and his state was taken away. So on and so forth. Nana Sahib's of Kanpur, his pension was discontinued. Now these political causes definitely had an impact of raising discontentment. The economic causes mentioned were the machine-made cotton textiles that were being popularized, and how it ruined our indigenous industries. Then the sepoys, their pay scales and the pay scales of the English were at variance, and this infuriated them. Then the General Service Enlistment Act, where the sepoys were required to serve outside the country. Certain social legislations were also not liked by the people, which is reflected in this book, and the book mentions the Sati Prevention Act, the Widow Remarriage Act, and abolition of Persian language and the introduction of English. So these causes have been highlighted, and then the immediate cause reflected in the textbook, as I said, was the issue of cartridge. As you've seen, the interesting visual which I showed to you was something that engaged me, because the entire picture of the cartridge, the visualization of Rani of Jhansi is in itself very interesting.
Yes.
And it was something that I thought maybe an artist has done, you know, the author must have engaged. But when the source is mentioned, it was a painting in 1819, somehow
By
it interested
unknown
me.
artist.
Unknown artist. Then you see, it talks about the spread. Now the spread was mentions Dhaka, Chittagong, Baharampur, Meerut, Lucknow, Kanpur, and many of the states also did not participate, has been reflected. A very interesting thing which I wanted to share with you are certain lines that I thought you know, should be known to you. It is true that the movement failed, but failure was for the time being. It was the starter of a subsequent movement. The anti-British movement was the first step towards independence movement. It was materialized in 1947. So there is a hope inbuilt into it while discussing the effect of how it could not be successful. So this is in a nutshell the textbook's analysis of the Bangladesh in the context of the 1857. Now what does the Nepal textbook say? As far as Nepal textbook is concerned, it begins with the transition from the company's rule from traders to territory. It talks about, very briefly, about the political consequences of Dalhousie's doctrine of lapse. Then it talks about the sepoys, because sepoys were important, and it says that certain rules, like for example their pay scales, then the issue of cartridge has been discussed. It mentions that the Indian nationalists called this revolt as National Revolution, whereas the English call it as the Sepoys Rebellion. Then it goes further and says, though the English suppressed this rebellion, its effect were far from over. So again, the component of hope, which the subsequent event, we see the 1905, the 1930, 1942, probably you know, had the simmering effect of achievement of Swaraj. Then the Sri Lankan textbook, as far as 1857 is concerned, is once again interesting. It terms it as Sepoys Rebellion of 1857. The most of Sepoys were Hindus and Muslims. During the period from 1763 to 1856, they erupted over 25 such rebellion. So the number is also given here, that it was not just 1857, prior to it. And then you can make a subtle comparison with the Bangladesh textbook, which names these movements, and 3 of them have been, I have just mentioned about them. Then who were the sepoys? They were soldiers, and the struggle was not just limited to the army. It moved on to the common people, because they were also unhappy with the policies of the British. Then how do they term it? Once again, I have put it in inverted comma. It is considered as a landmark event in history of independence movement. So the thrust of its significance is also mentioned. Moving further are the causes, and as you know, the causes have once again been reflected. The policy of capturing areas in India. Now here you can see the language. They have not talked about which are the areas that were captured, but in a subtle manner the policy of expansion and the way the territories were annexed to the British Empire. The policies formulated by the British were benefiting the English, and here also a very generalized statement, because we do not know the specificity, but here definitely the large landscape of the policies having derogatory impact on the indigenous people has been reflected. Policy crippled the Indian industries. Then the sepoys were disappointed. The immediate cause was the Enfield rifle. So the issue of the cartridge, you can see, is common across. It has been said. Then it had to be broken, and therefore the sepoys resisted because the mouth had to be used, and therefore when it was greased with animal fat, it hurted the sentiments of the people. Then the emphasis of Mughal Pandey has been reflected, though very briefly, but his visuals stand out. I mean, there is a huge visual of Mughal Pandey which has been reflected in the analysis. Then it is also mentioned that he shot an English official. The English imposed penalty on Mughal Pandey. The starting of the movement has been reflected. Then why could it not succeed? That has been reflected as lack of proper planning, lack of many could not join, lack of weaponry, then lack of leadership. What was its impact? Impact was, it led to the company's rule came to an end. It was taken over by the British Crown. Then religious freedom was granted, and India began to manage independence movement in a more organized manner, and the establishment of national associations. So this is, you can see for yourself, a very brief trajectory. You can take it as a research topic if you have access to contemporary and updated versions of these textbooks, and perhaps see the analogy what you have studied and what is getting reflected. This will give you a very broad landscape of seeing this movement, how it has been projected, and it is a body of research. It can be a project, you can make audio visuals, you can make a script, and get yourself interested in it. You can also start writing in your own words what this great uprising was, and how was it so significant to each one of us. So this is in a nutshell that I wanted you to understand. And if you are reading Themes in Indian History, where it is titled as Rebel and the Raj, the Revolt of 1857 and its representation. So this is what I wanted to say. Okay. And the luminaries who have been mentioned in the Bangladesh textbook in particular is Rani of Jhansi and Nana Sahib. And you can yourself see that Rani of Jhansi regiment was part of Subhash Chandra Bose women's regiment. Yes. And the women who participated in it were ranging from very young age, I have written about it, from the age, if I am not mistaken, from 9 to onwards. And the most important thing was they also operated secret radios. So a name which stands throughout the journey of our history, as well as even now people are making movies, they are writing about her. So this is how 1857 has been portrayed across. So this is what I wanted to share with you about one movement. Then coming to 1905, which is very important. Now you can yourself understand why 1905. We don't want you to remember it as something that has to be remembered like that, because dates have a significance and they are attached to something. And when we talk of Swadeshi, the movement, the protest against this movement was the Swadeshi movement, and this also has been reflected across. And when I started reading about it, I would share with you, they are just the excerpts. They have been given in a way variedly across, but here I wanted to just tell you how they have been positioned. And after 1857, I move on to 1905, the Swadeshi movement. Now in some books, it has been very overtly stated. It has not been mentioned because non-violence and satyagraha have been referred across, and therefore in Maldivian books they don't find a space in terms of discussion. Whereas in Bangladesh textbook I found that they have been mentioned in detail. Why was in 1905 Bengal partition? The reason given in the book was is administrative reasons and the weakening of the national movement. The leaders of the movement have been given, they are Surendranath Banerjee, Arvind Ghosh and Bipin Chandra Pal. Now, for example, when I started reading them, I found that there was some kind of different spelling. So, probably here I want to say that it could be the way we pronounce. Initially I thought we are using different spelling, but why is it so in the other book? Probably it is the pronunciation that makes a difference. Then who were the supporters of these movements? It was definitely a mass movement, but here there is a mention of students, the business people, other than our freedom fighters. So in a limited way there is a projection of it being a mass movement, but here I found that there was no reference to women at all. Then the strategy of the movement was very important, which has been referred again across the books that I have analyzed, was that boycott of all government institutions, which is what different movements had. Then giving up titles, giving up legal honorary positions. The day of the partition was declared as a day of national mourning. Use of Swadeshi, homemade stuff, was given a lot of importance, and particularly textile, which has been mentioned in great detail. Then it was an important movement because it led to revival of our Indian industry, and many small scale and cottage industries started coming up. Then student played a lead role. There are several other narration that is given regarding 1905, but here in a very small nutshell I wanted to say that the strategy of Swadeshi has been discussed, as well as 1907 how the annulment of partition took place has also been reflected. Moving on, this movement has found space in the Sri Lankan textbook. Bengal was partitioned, it states, because it was a large province and therefore administering it would be difficult. This was the main administrative reason that was given. Despite protest, the partition took place. The campaign launched the use of indigenous good, development of Indian industry and the boycott of foreign goods. A campaign was launched to make people more aware of how they should use their homemade goods, and it led to, as I said, development of industries. So in a nutshell, the 1905, you can see how they have been referred. You can read your own books. So it could be an interesting trajectory of how 1905 is reflected across. So this is how in an, well, there could be details of it which are there, and definitely some political developments that took place have also been reflected. But here, as I said in the very beginning, the limitation is just to talk about some of the movement that I have shown you in my PowerPoint presentation.
Absolutely. Ma'am, I want to ask you something, that this particular session you have dealt with textual materials of some neighboring countries. You've mentioned Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal. But what about the foreign countries? Have they even written about India's struggle for independence? Any such countries you want to mention?
Yes. Well, I did not have a chance to procure other books as such, but here when I was working at the George Eckert Institute, I found a book called Cambridge History Program, India from Mughal Empire to the British Raj 1992. So I have taken this book for analysis purpose, but I will not be able to tell you where it has been used. As far as countries are concerned, because I procured from them, I was I would say, you know, fortunate enough to get them, and that's how this presentation I have prepared. But this is where I have, you know, I do not have, so I did not mention just one of them I had. So
Great.
this is how it is, it's limited, and probably not more countries I could procure. This is the repertoire that I had with me, which I am sharing with you.
What you have shared today is amazing, and all the history students, history is very, history makes a person curious and they always want to know more. So if a student is passionate, he or she will search more books and they'll get to know more about different countries who have written about India's struggle for independence. Ma'am, I have one more question. So out of all these books, after reading, researching, did you feel like they have done justice to India's struggle for independence, or did you feel like proud once again on freedom fighters?
See, well, as far as any one of us is concerned, we get very passionate with our own struggle, no doubt. But we must also appreciate that given in the larger scheme of the themes that they have chosen for their textual material, there's a team that selects. They have given us a space, and to me the giving of the space is very important at the first turn, and I think I felt very happy to see that we are there. As I told you, there will be endless ways of us trying to say this should be there, this should be there, because definitely we get passionate about our own freedom struggle, but we must at the same time understand that there are certain other parameters which make the authors select, and probably those parameters must have come into their minds while they were trying to project our own struggle. So for me, this inclusion at the first stage was something that was appreciated, and it was not just the freedom struggle that I have done. I have seen books from many perspectives, because every time when I read a theme, a question comes to me: how is it being reflected in different materials of different country? It could be textual, it could be other print media. Now we have the digital repository, which is very, very powerful to see how people are talking about it. Now, well, the talking part I do not know, but here I concentrated on whatever I had, and I felt like sharing with you, because when people are talking about 75 years, I said even my small analysis could form part of it, and it is this which has made me come to you, because I said let me see how our neighboring countries envision. I said in the beginning, limitation, yes, because of the books that I have, and therefore the dates they must have changed over a span of time. I don't have the contemporary books, but definitely when I found that yes, it has been reflected, and therefore I took a chart, put the countries across and the movements which they were talking about. I said I must have a point of analysis, and these movements became a point of analysis. There were other factual narratives, no doubt. If you start reading, you will find it yourself, but I limited myself to these and felt happy. We can all talk about this should be there, it should be more engaging. These are suggestions, and if at different points of time, if people want us to suggest, definitely we can. If we write a paper, we can say that these things need to be projected, but is at this particular point of time and at this stage when we are talking about 75 years of our independence, I thought let me share this small analysis that I have done. Then moving on now to the non-cooperation movement.
Okay.
This, yes.
Just a reminder, we have got last 6 minutes left.
Okay.
And there's a lot to discuss, where Indian history is huge. And if we talk about independence, there are so many movements our freedom fighters did. So we don't have much time left, but yes, please share something or the other related to, because you have done a lot of research and you are a researcher and even a professional, and if I'm not wrong, that then you even write. You write poetry. So if you have written anything on the occasion of our Independence Day, which have just gone, can you share anything you've written for our students?
Well, my analysis stops here because of the time frame, but 1920 and 1930, so is 1942 reflected. at some point of time I will share with you, because I have done this, but yes, because of time constraint, let me share, because I feel for it. I had done a field work while doing the 1942 Quit India movement, and I did see some of the prisons that inspired me. Especially I went to Balia, and where I was taken inside, and I was told that Chittu Pandey was staying here in one of the prisons. And seeing the lockdown now, where we are in the house, but we have all the facility, that made me feel, and of course I felt at that time, that here we have all facilities, but what about these people who were staying there, and how they could still have that motivation of continuing. So I wrote this, and probably I want to share with you. Could the spirit be imprisoned, lying on the floor, gazing at the sky, counting, recounting stars, twinkling throughout the night? Oh, what a scenic view, radiating the glitters and joy, celebrating a festive occasion. I wonder, what was the happy event? Nights following one after another, giving me hope, assurances. Move on, have faith, endure, be patient. Journey is perilous, yet rewarding. Oh, these iron walls, dingy spaces, couldn't cage the spirit, the resolve, determination, commitment for a cause, breaking the chain of servitude, slavery, penning experiences, arduous journey, travelled to be travelled, self, many known, unknown, with faith within, I can, I will, I shall. So you can see the motivation which people had, and probably it is this motivation and the saga of our freedom struggle that made me explore how this journey has been reflected across. While I shared with you two of the movements, there were two more which have been found spaces, but the end of our struggle for independence has been very abruptly penned, which probably I thought could have more lines, but this is again expecting something which has already been said. Yes. Probably the suggestions can continue, and you as a scholar, as a researcher, as a student can work on it, come with your own ideas, your own interpretation, and this is how the struggle for independence could be engaging, interesting, and very rewarding. Thank you so much, and wishing you all the very best. Any questions, do ask me.
Absolutely. Well, to begin with, I just want to say that the poem was wonderfully written, and you've captured the motivation so well. And my favorite line was, dingy in those dingy spaces, and we can't lose the spirit, the determination, the motivation. I'm sure the freedom fighters who stayed in those prisons must have felt the same. Well, if our students want to write any such thing, any poem or any thing they want to capture the feel of the India's struggle for independence, would you like to give them any tips?
Oh, they are already doing, because there is a creative writing competition which I think many of the children are engaging themselves with, and one of them is to write creatively. So I think many of them are already in the process, and there is no end to creativity. There is projects that you are doing, and as far as assignments are concerned, you can innovate, write in your school annual report, you can also take part in debates. There are so many ways that you can project ideas. Yes. This is one way that I thought I'll come to you and keep you motivated.
And we can't thank you enough for bringing this topic to us, especially it's 21st of August, which is like 6 days away from 15th of August, and we've just seen the 75th Independence Day. Every Indian celebrated Independence Day with full vigor and all the enthusiasm. So thank you so much, ma'am, for being here. I really feel honored to be a part of this entire discussion. And I will do, and I'll try and read these books you have mentioned. Maybe I'll get another perspective. Thank you, ma'am, once again for your time.
Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you to all the students for being a part of this program, and I'm sure the way I am feeling proud right now on our freedom fighters and their struggle for independence, you must be feeling the same. So all the history students and everybody out there, if you want to read more about India's struggle for independence, please go through the books, of course our books, and as well as the neighboring countries which have written about India's struggle for independence. Thank you once again for being with us, for enjoying this session, for participating in this session. Stay here, don't go anywhere, keep on watching PMeVIDYA channels and NCERT Official, our YouTube channel, because we've got a lot of subjects, a lot of topics for every day for all of you. For today we are wrapping up these sessions, but on Monday we'll come back again with more subjects, with more topics. So keep on watching these sessions, stay healthy, stay happy, and yes, get vaccinated. Thank you so much once again. Namaskar.